Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Brickballing Roundtable. Really pleased to be working tonight on this one. In particular, really pleased not to be working with Adam. So it's nice to have free reign. I've got no Geordie holding me back tonight, so it's just me. And I'm going to teach you all about wide receivers because I've got the best hands in the country. Literally, there's nothing anyone can do to stop me here. So I might just go on a little rant now. I'm joking. We are here to talk wide receivers. And whilst I am the best catcher in the country, I don't know how to run the route. So I brought on a couple of friends in order to help me with that side of things. So welcome to, I'm going to introduce them and they'll introduce themselves. So first things first, he was latest today, so I'm going to introduce him first. Jay Moss, how you doing, my man?
I'm good, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, very good. I'm all right to say the single reason we was late going live tonight was because of you, were it?
It might have been. I don't know what the discussion was before I got here.
I'm only joking with you, man. Pleasure to have you on. You just give us a quick introduction to, obviously I know who you are, but for people watching, what you do and why you're here.
Yes, so I am the head coach of East Kilbride Pirates and receiver coach at the National Adult Programme, Men's Adult Programme. I'm not really sure what all the distinctions are these days. And yeah, so I played the sport for 9 seasons, I think, with the Pirates throughout that entire time. I started off through uni ball, the mess that was uni ball, back in the sort of mid to late noughties. And yeah, and then for the Pirates that entire period of time. And now I am coach. So I coached for a while at the youth level, which is at under 17 or under 16. Yeah, under 16, I think now. If they stopped changing that, I would remember these things. But so under 16, and then coached at under 19 for a few years with Spoonie, who I've no doubt most people will know, and then then up to the senior team coach just now.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining us, Jamie. And I'm going to introduce Mike Davis to the show. How are you doing, Mike?
Hi there. Yeah, very good, very good.
Yeah, do you want to just give us a quick introduction as to who you are?
Yep.
Other than a Steelers fan?
Steelers fan, absolutely, yeah. Mike Davies, I am the receivers coach for under 17s GB team.
Okay, brilliant. And do you coach outside of that as well?
Yeah, so obviously we've been a bit all over the place the last season and a bit, haven't we? But coaching down at Ouse Valley for the youth teams there. We've got 2 youth teams, the Red Hawks and then the Black Hawks as well.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Pleasure to have you on the show. And I'm going to introduce Andrew Morgan next. How are you doing, Andrew? You okay?
Yeah, really good. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, pleasure. And you've got 2 roles within GB. I've noticed. I was trying to type it up this week. So you want to go through them and everything else you're involved with?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the offensive coordinator for the Great Britain Junior Programme. I'm the wide receivers coach for the students programme. And I'm also the offensive coordinator at the Shropshire Revolution.
So I'm assuming your missus must like American football to be involved with all that.
This is the advantage of not having a missus. You can do as much.
All right.
Great start, guys. Thanks for that.
Great start, sorry. Yeah. Fair enough. And that's why he's single, maybe.
I didn't need this kind of character attack on Sunday night. I thought this was a safe place.
So I'm just going to carry on digging my hole whilst I introduce Harry. Harry, pleasure to have you on the show.
That was harsh. I think that was not the nicest.
I know, yeah, savage. I mean, I'm just used to that coaches moaning about the misses that much there. It was an assumption now backfired.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
Go on, Harry. Who are you?
Yeah, my name's Harry Routledge. I am currently the GB Students Pass Game Coordinator, but mainly gonna hopefully work with receivers there. And then also I am the head coach at LJMU, which is the uni team at Liverpool John Moores University.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for having you all on. Andrew, I will apologise. It's the last apologise you'll ever get from me. My foot in my mouth. Jamie, Sam Bloomfield came in the chat and said he's just selling. So he's got a signed Julian Edelman mini helmet to go with that. So yeah, we'll jump right into it, guys. And I think the first question we've got really is about breaking down the fundamentals for the wide receiver position. So straight into it, I think we did do. Obviously, we had the fundamental blocking, but what are those generic fundamentals that you guys look for at the GB level, but around the league? And Mike, we'll go over to you first for that.
So obviously, working with the younger age groups, we're looking at a certain level of football awareness and being able to control their body. You got younger kids who sometimes have grown a bit too quickly, a bit gangly, and we need kids that know what they're doing. They can control their body and they can make the right movements. But in terms of football fundamentals, we're looking for nice strong stances and a good break out of that, and knowing their route tree as well. So.
Yeah, brilliant. And J Moss?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of places you could go with this, but I guess probably the first thing is they naturally need to look like they're capable of being an athlete, capable of being able to catch. And I think one of the things that you get, particularly in rookie days, and these sorts of things, is when you see guys come in, you'll obviously do your best to coach people up and stuff, but there's probably a level that guys need to start at in terms of hand-eye coordination and bits and pieces like that. So if I'm talking about the very basics, the first thing to look at, that'd probably be it. And then once you're coaching, really it's about specificity for me. It's probably the same for a lot of positions, but just getting into the actual things that you'll be doing. There's been a lot of guys over time, some guys really, great athletes, or even, a lot of good receivers, but a lot of it tends to be that they maybe don't practice anything that's that specific, or there's a lot of wasted movement and bits and pieces like that. So it's really about trying to be as specific as possible with guys and making sure they're good at what they're trying to achieve. Because we don't have a lot of time to coach, so you've got to make sure you're smart with it.
Perfect. And Harry, for the fundamentals, what would you be coaching or giving advice for that?
Well, I think the big thing for me is, especially like when you get to a GB level, I think you find that a lot of guys have like an element of like their own fundamentals that they've kind of pulled. And I think for receivers, they're pretty generic to start with, do you know what I mean? So it's like stance and start is one of the big things that you start with any position. But those kind of stance and starts will vary from whatever team or kind of player you get. So you can get a big range of stance and starts when it comes from when you get to like a GB level. But those are like stance and start for me, footwork. So working in and out of breaks. So that's one of the big things. Guys that can be under control but still working quickly. So that's one of the things that I think you'll see that at the GB level, like differentiates guys. So guys are good at those kind of drills, the footwork drills, the cutting, the box drills, those kind of things.
Yeah,
being able to be under control, and then obviously just having natural catches, I think, is a cat's tail. Having natural catches is a big thing as well, right? So guys being able to naturally catch the ball. A lot of the time you pull that from playing previous sports, so whether you've learned that from quite a young age, so being able to do natural catches, it can be easy to stand outside and only get throwing the ball one time. Do you know what I mean? Like especially at a practice or a game. So being able to be a natural catcher and develop that as well over time is a big thing for me.
Yeah, a great point from Adam here, and a nice plug. You can buy some ladders from EP Sports, work on football. Yeah. I'm sure we can bring up a code somewhere where you can get a discount on that. And Andrew, my best mate, is there anything you can further add to that?
I think like leading on from what Harry talked about with the hands, it's being able to catch the ball in a range of different ways as well, because obviously you've got the different ways in which you might be running across the field, high, low ball, over the top kind of thing. There's a range of different ways you've got to work with your receivers on how to catch it, especially at the contact game where there's helmets, there's shoulder pads. I mean, we've probably all seen it. I've done it a million times as well, where there's a fade coming over the top. We haven't squeezed the elbows, made like a basket kind of thing. And it's those kind of things that need to be worked on at the fundamental level with the receiver. And I suppose talking about the GB level, it's about knowing what to do in your routes. There's a whole toolbox and range of things that we could get into in terms of what to do against press coverage, against half, how to close down hit distances, all that kind of stuff. There's a range of things from the stance and start to the actual catch that is really important to try and work through.
Yeah, brilliant. So, I mean, a question I've always had, and anyone can feel free to answer, can you actually teach someone how to catch? Because I've just thought you either can or you can't, and if you can, you play wide receiver. If you can't, you play DB. That's my theory on it. But is it something where you can naturally see someone's talent? I think if he drops a couple of balls early on, is it just rep, or can you just is it coachable? Let's say.
I would say so. I'll lead on that. I think it is. I think there's a range of different things you can do. I think it's really easy to kind of like make that kind of distinction, and like it's almost like a flow chart of receiver or DB kind of thing. But it's really easy to kind of like think about how you like using soft hands away from the body, because it's such an unnatural ball to kind of like catch in the first place, that as long as you develop those things and just hammer and really try and reiterate the amount of catches to get in practice in the range of different ways, I think it's something that's definitely able to be taught.
Right, okay. Harry, what's your thoughts? Do you think you can teach people to catch?
I think you can. I think it's obviously difficult because it's something that's already like quite well ingrained within someone that they've learned for a long period of time. Like you catch playing all kind of sports, right? So those things. So some things can be hard to get out of the habit of doing. So the specific things that we will do in terms of catching that we want our guys to do specifically, which might be different to a lot of other sports. Obviously, in kind of like rugby and cricket specific sports, like you'll catch a lot of things that will be kind of your eyes won't follow the ball a lot of the time. It's kind of just you're expected to catch stuff like kind of below the waist a lot of the time as well. Whereas really we try and push guys to be pushing their hands to the ball. So like you see in basketball where guys will reach out to catch the ball, we want those guys to see the ball hit their hands a lot of the time. So that's one of the big things, like having hand-eye coordination. If you can see the ball hit your hands, the chance of you catching it goes up, right, quite a lot. So trying to get guys out of those habits that they potentially have learned previous to coming to the sport is one of the big things for me when it comes to catching.
Yeah, and J-Mosh, you kind of smirked a little bit and pulled your face there. Do you think it's possible, or would you?
No. So I mean, I was actually thinking, because I kind of agree with what Harry said, but I was just trying to determine whether it was going to go like just be contrarian, since Harry had already made that point. Like I might as well not bother going in a second. But I wonder, when we talk about whether you can teach someone how to catch, I don't know that it's as binary as that. Like I think there's a scale. So can you teach someone to catch, or can you teach someone? Can someone get better and catch a higher percentage of passage? Yes. Can it be meaningful enough to turn someone who physically can't catch into someone who's amazing? Probably not. I mean, I'm sure it's been done, so I'm saying probably not. And I've certainly seen guys whose hands start off relatively poor who end up being perfectly functional receivers. But I would say that depending on what you want to achieve and depending on where you want to get to, like within the sport, particularly in the UK, you're going to need more practice time than you're going to have available at practice. So that person is going to have to go do it by themselves. And then once they start doing that, you're going to have to hope that they're applying themselves to continue focusing on not doing things that are really, like you find that guys, like they do this thing where like their hands are like so tense and they practice like that. And so they practice like the tension and things like that. And I think that can be really difficult to overcome. So I'm not saying it's impossible, and I definitely would say you can improve, but I suppose whether that question's the relevant one, like can you improve well enough that someone that can't catch could be a really good, say, Div 1 or Prem receiver? It's going to be a long journey.
And if anyone wants to know why J-Moss was such a good receiver, just by the size of his hands, look at the size of them in comparison. I thought
Man, I have the smallest hands ever. Honestly, I get tortured by this all the time. No.
The camera must have length.
It does. Like if that's there twice the size. It shows. But no. So like, I don't actually have very big hands at all. That used to be like a whole. That's a thing. If I had amazing hands, I'd have been Calvin Johnson. It would have been amazing.
That's the only thing holding me back, I'm sure. Mike, you must get a couple of the younger lads who think they could be receivers, even at that level, and you can see the potential in them. Is that catching thing, obviously, is a massive part of it, but do you think it's just a kind of repetition thing, or are you just kind of, go and play DB kind of situation?
No, absolutely not. I'd never shun anybody away from it, and you want to bring everybody in that you can, really. But I completely agree with what's been said before, and it is a sliding scale. I don't think it's a case of you can't catch, you'll never be able to catch. Everybody realistically can catch to a certain extent, and to to practice. Practice makes perfect, and you would get better at it over time. And it's just running the right drills, doing the right types of things, making sure that your technique is correct, as Jamos says, not just being so incredibly rigid with it, trying to clap together and catch it. Making sure you're doing the right things and practicing the right things. We see a lot of people that are not necessarily needing to try and catch with one hand, but want to do it for the effect, want to do that and make themselves look good, and end up dropping balls and making themselves look worse. But and also to go on from what Harry was saying as well, where when you put pads on and you have all that extra around you, if you are letting the ball come to yourself, you're not in the same position as if you were wearing pads. You also got people trying to compete for the ball as well. So actually going and getting the ball out there as well, getting the ball before it comes to you, is something that I'm really keen to coach and to bring up in the athletes who work with.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think just thinking about it, I think the proof is, if you need any proof that practice helps, all you need is to watch 90% of receivers after Christmas when you're first back. It's just like Drop City. So it used that used to be something that I experienced every single year until I started working right through winter and stuff with the quarterbacks. So it definitely is the case that you become more consistent over time, but you just need to. I think you need to temper it a little bit, because if someone comes in with no hand-eye coordination whatsoever, that's a really long journey. So I think that's probably my answer.
And it's understanding how you tier things up. So when I was coaching junior stuff, at the Lions years and years ago, we'd have rookie camps of 16-year-olds and stuff. You'd start with tennis balls, and you'd start with the mini footballs, and then something as easy as not throwing the ball overarm, actually underarm and spinning it, because then it's in their eye line that they can then locate the ball, and then an overarm throw, and then you put more into it. There's all working around posts with hands and all. There's a series of different drills that you can do to build that up before you even get to running routes and putting all of those motor skills together, because then that's where it amps up. Then you put it when you have people starting hitting. You've got to really build up where you're taking your drills.
Brilliant. And it's a good point, because we're going to touch on there, learning the wide receiver position. I think this is a question you had, Jamos. You mentioned, obviously, and I'll go to you first, it's about concepts and not routes. Is that right? You want to explain on that a little bit?
Yeah, if one of the things that's really challenging when you get new guys in is, I'm trying to think of examples offhand, but if you take, for example, stick as a concept. So with stick, just if anyone wants to make sure that we're talking about the same thing on the outside, you'd have a go. The next guy in, depending on how you do it, will have a shoot, go straight out, and then the guy inside that, and I'm checking for Harry, checking that I'm doing inside stick, but the guy inside that will then run the stick route. And so one of the things that frequently you would see with the rookies is when they release on their go, they'll release inside the corner, and the corner's eyes are then perfectly capable of coming in, and that shoot can be blown up and he can react really quickly. And so getting outside's one of the coachable points there. And I think that's one of, maybe not the best example, but one of a range of things that matter as a receiver. Is you can be better at your job by knowing what other people in the park are doing. It's really frustrating as a coach when someone might run the best whatever, they might run the most amazing posts, and then you've got a route inside that's complementary in some way, and they could really work that particular relationship between the two, and they don't do it because they don't understand that there is a whole concept there. So it's about trying to teach the whole thing and make sure that the guys understand even that to that extent, but then on top of that, what other coverages do you get? How do we adjust this so that the same thing works against multiple coverages? And it's something that I think we really try and focus on in Pirates, but I think is one of those things that everyone should really be picking up, is the idea that you don't need a million pass plays. You need to be really, really capable of running the same, say, 5 at a really basic level. And then make sure your guys are able to adjust to all the situations that come about. And if you get guys that are able to do that, you find that your success rate shoots through the roof, not because you've got a trillion plays, plus they can't remember that anyway, but they actually understand football a lot more holistically, and they've got a more intuitive sense of if that guy does that over here, then that will leave a space there. So I'm actually going to adjust my route a little bit. And I think the whole idea, especially in Britball, the whole concept that everything will be super, super slick, you kind of have to put to the side a little bit. You just got to make sure that guys understand what they're trying to achieve and how you're going to be beating what you see in front of you. And I don't think that really works if you've got a guy who you see all the time with the wristbands, like, this player got to go. Yeah. This player got a hitch, and you're like, come on, man. You
they come to practice. Like, I've learned all of X. And then you're like, okay,
yeah, that one, that's a classic. I hate that.
I don't know what it is. Yeah, like, exactly.
But what? So you want a quarter of the reps? Is that what you want? Like, you're not willing to go in anywhere else? Like, behave. No more than that.
And Mike, for the younger level, does that apply, or is that Absolutely. Sometimes? I was going to say, for me, it might seem like it's a bit too much to learn that full concept. Do you not just break it down to learn the routes first, or?
Absolutely, throw him in at the deep end with this. I mean, at the club level, where I when I am making the plays up, I'm calling the plays and designing the playbook, I will always teach and coach as a concept as opposed to just routes. Because realistically, as Gemma said, you can have 3 or 4 very well drilled concepts, and you can run them out of several different formations, and you've tripled the size of your playbook and the fronts that you're showing just by moving people around the field. But realistically, you're still running the same concept. And then once we progress past the early stages, and you've got people that have been running this for a while, they're a couple of years in, perhaps, you start to understand that there is a little bit of tolerance in those routes, and there is a bit of flexibility. For example, running a smash concept, and you've got the inside guys running a corner, and your outside guys running that hitch route, but he's going to say, well, realistically, I can see that my coverage is a little close or a little off. Maybe I want to pull that hitch route a little shorter, so I know the guy over the top of me has got more room to make the play. And they can they can think about it a bit more cognizant about the whole process than just I'm going to run my route, we'll see where it goes. And then you sort of breed that I should be getting the ball every single play type philosophy as well. And then you get receivers coming back to the huddle saying, why didn't you get the ball to me? Why didn't I get the ball on that one? I was open, I did that. Yes, but by running your route, you made somebody else even more open or whatever. So they need to understand the bigger picture of the game.
That's why I don't play receiver. I'm too selfish. Again, one of those only reasons. Harry, I'm going to move on to you and put you on the spot a little bit. Give me your 3 favourite concepts if you want to. If you could only have 3, and Morgan, you're going to get 3 different ones, but I'm leaving you to last.
So I've got to come up with three
different to Harry's. Yeah, that's fine.
Different. So if we ever play EKP, these were the best ones for us.
Oh, shut up, man. This is the worst. Right, so Harry's talking
we've got 2 against
we didn't adjust at all.
2 against
it's so
EKP,
frustrating.
and then there's 1 against Manchester Titans, which is always a money one as well. So, EKP, we're going to do a double post. Any kind of double post.
I'm really glad you said, because I was going to wait for you saying double post. I was like,
double post. So the big thing about double posters as well is that a lot of the time the guys, and that's the big thing I think for me when I played receiver, one of the big steps that I took was that I realized that just because I'm running my route the right way means that I am potentially covered, but it means that I'm opening somewhere else. So like Mike was saying about kind of understanding how you affect coverage with your route is a big thing. And that was a big thing for me when I played. Like that definitely changed my thinking on how I was going to run stuff. Can I open other people up even more by maybe cutting this a little bit shorter or taking a harder break?
So talk us through double post there. So are we running that is that generally from spread?
So you know me, like 2x2. So it's just like, so we'd run double post on one side, and it's literally just 2 posts. So the outside guy is just running a really skinny post though. So generally you want to run it against some kind of too high coverage. So what we're trying to do is kind of put that safety on that side in a bit of a bind. He's got to play one or the other essentially.
Yeah.
So generally what happened is that he'll take the inside post because he will, and then the corner is in outside leverage, has to chase this skinny post basically, and then you just throw it over the safety and it's touchdown. So that's what we would do.
That inside post is amazing. It's like, look at the shiny for a safety. Like,
well, and that's the big thing about that.
I'm stopping that yet, Jamos. Sure you haven't.
What's that?
I'm sure. I'm surprised you haven't coached them up to stop that yet, mate.
No one.
Oh no, that wasn't during my tenure. Let's not.
No.
Okay.
That was actually no. That's lies. That was during my tenure. I was just playing at that point in time. It was horrible. I was standing on the sideline. I was like, and that was the worst bit. It was cover 4. I'm like,
I get them.
The big thing on that is that like we're very specific in how we run it as well. So we would say like our slot, he has very specific rules on he has to outside release the alley defender. So essentially, once you outside release the alley defender, you understand. Like our guys will hopefully understand that if they outside release him, they actually become the safety's responsibility. Whereas if they inside release him, they actually become the Mike's responsibility. So it means that the safety, if you get outside release that Sam, so the alley, like the safety has to play down to you. So that just gives your outside guy one-on-one on an outside leverage defender with a post, right? So pretty much can't lose, right? So double post is always going on stick is always a big one that we will use. So we'll use it as a kind of a full field horizontal stretch concept. And then third one we always like to do, but it's tough. Like sometimes because the receiver's so quarterback dependent. Like it's one of those positions where it does like if you haven't got a quarterback, like it's really hard to be a good receiver, right? But like we like 4 verts for us is always a big one as well. If we can get that in early and get good at it. And then we throw it on the last play of the game, and the safety tips it to someone on our team, and then we score.
So anyway, guys,
that's an unbelievable reference. That is an unbelievable reference.
I'm joking, Harry.
Yeah, so that would be nice. They're our top ones normally. So there's loads of others that I like, obviously. And
don't steal them off.
It does say a lot, though. It does say a lot, and Harry made the point already, but it does say a lot that all of Harry's favourite concepts basically involve that thing getting hosed right down the field. Like essentially, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't need to listen to what Harry's saying because that's not going to be happening for you.
No, I'm hoping that's not the problem at GB level.
You got to hope so.
Yeah, got up. So if any level, and Andrew, if you could give us 3. I know Harry's taken 3.
I'm a big fan of flood concepts. I like having a flood. If you've got a QB with the arm, they can stay in the pocket, and if they don't, then you can roll them out, and then you can hit it on the fly. Because I kind of like the way that the reads will open up on it. So you've got ideally you're gonna run it out of trips. I mean, you can do it in 2x2, but trips works the best for it in that. Your 3 is going to run a quick out as the first read, and then if he's open, then that's the dump off every single time. Let him turn up the field. Then you're going to have your eyes to the number 2 who'll run a speed out at 10 to 12 yards, and then you've got the number 1 who'll just run a clear out kind of thing. Just take the corner off the top, and then you've got the high low. Because then what you can also do on the backside, you can run like a bit of a hero post. You can get the X coming like across the field as well. So I like having reads in the same kind of eye line for the quarterback so that it just kind of all works out for them there. My second one would probably be one that we had at Great Britain when I was coaching with the seniors, which was charges, which is basically a drive concept where you've got an absolute cover 2 beater of you've got the posts, you've got a post and a 10-yard in, and then you've got the underneath shallow on the backside with a swing, and it just if you've got a too high look, shallow cross. That's what I'm looking for, not drive. Thanks, Harry. What you're doing is you're kind of playing with the safety, you're playing with the outside linebacker at the same time with the running back swing, with the shallow cross from the other slot, and it's just something that is a really nice, consistent play for a team. And then my final one would probably be sin. Which, I mean, Mike was talking about teaching concepts earlier in the previous question. Teach a concept that's got the roots in the name in the first place. So the team from the inside with an in from the outside receiver. So especially if you're running that in trips, you've got an inside release seam, and then you've got 2 ins from the number 1 and 2, and it's just a case of the quarterback picking off which area is the best between those 2 ends, just to fire it in for a nice, easy completion. Those would probably be 3 of mine, because Harry took my first 3, obviously. We're on the same wavelength.
J Moss and Mike, I'll give you one of each while I pull up the next question quickly. So your favourite concept. You get one concept let's say 4th and 2 on the goal line. There you go. That's the situation.
Any situation, anytime ever.
Anything, it has to be 4th and 2.
Trips to the right, leave X out on the left-hand side by himself and run a fade. It doesn't matter. Everything else is irrelevant. 3-step fade, catch, plant, throw, get up in it. It doesn't matter. But that's all.
I mean, it sounds boring, but hitches will get you up the field all day. Just smashing double hitches will get you up the field all day. And as soon as it starts to get plugged up, you can just turn one of them upfield. So that's
yeah, flag, I love that in flag. Just all hitches and then hitch and go. that's my jam. So we're just going to simplify it a little bit. How do you teach routes in practice, indie and progressing to install? So we'll go to Mike first.
Yeah, teaching under 17s, cones are your best friend. I mean, once we get to the higher levels, once we get to GB, we're expecting people to know what these routes are, and we're expecting fine tuning and adjusting to the concepts that we're trying to install. But at club level, cones are your best friend. Just working out the steps, and we see a lot of different sized bodies at the youth level as well. So understanding that 3 steps or 5 steps for a taller 15-year-old, 16-year-old may not be the same 3 or 5 steps for a much shorter 13-year-old, for example. But working with that is and pacing it out that way is big help. And then removing slowly cones. Yeah.
Brilliant. And J-Moss?
So I mean, it's obviously it varies an awful lot by concept and by the level you're working at, but definitely start with making sure that everyone can sort of move their body through the motions of actually running it. That's going to be a primary thing. So as Mike talked about, if you want to use cones for that, I know Morgs does, then that's what you want to do. Alternatively, you can push yourself to getting bodies out there and actually having people react to it. But the laughter here. And then after that, I would say that where I typically sort of extend it to is because we kind of reel back the number of concepts that we actually have. We'll usually add in the next step being someone sort of given a very easy and clear read so that people can sort of react to what they might expect to see. I don't think with indies you have to go too far. I think that's one thing that people are always trying to think of an extreme way, but I think the most important message for us is just when we go to sevens in particular, or if we go to team, reminding them of the indies they just did. That's the big thing that people constantly have, especially at club level, is you have a whole indies session and then you get to team and it's just like it was a black hole. It never happened. So you kind of have to remind guys of remember we said that guy will move and you have to decide what to do. That's that bit there. And I think we think guys take things up pretty quickly. And that sort of develops that intuition around it.
I take that a bit further from what Jamie was saying, in terms of I mean, who doesn't love putting cones down for guys to run around? But the thing is, with some routes especially, you want to be able to teach those breaking points and those landmarks. So if we're teaching a corner, for example, you can say, oh yeah, it's 4 steps, you're going to put your inside foot on the ground, you're going to break. But they're either going to run it as an out or they're going to pretty much run straight up and the ball hits the ground every time. So putting them at the top of that break in their stance to then hit it and then bringing it back and back. So you kind of layer the route up. So, and that's obviously that would be from more of a a team level of an install level. So it would be straight into the break. Then it's 1 step in and then you bring it all the way back. So they kind of understand it a little bit better. That's where I would go with that, because my bugbear, I think this was one of my question points to put in. My bugbear with teams, and I've been on teams where I've seen this, is you learn the routes as a receiver through install, and it's just just run this line, and it's just so poorly done, and then inevitably the receiver's told off for not running the correct thing. You're like, well, you haven't actually broken it down and taught it properly.
Yeah, brilliant. And Harry, anything to add on to that in terms of teaching routes in practice?
Not a huge amount. I think so. Process-wise for us, we would kind of do it in a stage of, you kind of learn the way you're trying to get to an install. You work on your technique in Indy. So a lot of times it's like you either go do a 90-degree cut or a 135, or you know what I mean. So if it's a comeback, you work on that kind of cut. You'll have within Indy, we'll generally like put the QBs and the wideouts together, so you get some roots on air. So the roots on air stuff will be super specific, and we'll work on like timing stuff. That's a lot of like obviously everything is timing, right? But a skinny post doesn't really need timing, if that makes sense. Whereas throwing a hitch, throwing a stick, throwing a comeback, those things need real specific timing for the QB and the wideout to get on the same page. So we'll spend a lot of time at the end of Indy, once we worked on technique stuff, kind of developing that timing with the quarterback. And then we run kind of team on air. So a lot of that stuff is making sure guys get to the right depths, run it on the right assignments. And then obviously when you get to 7-on-7, that's the big one for us, where it all kind of comes into play. And especially those kind of option routes where you're trying to read the defense or get over a certain guy, you get your kind of time to practice it there as well. So the big thing for us is kind of making sure that Indies, you work on your technique on that first 10, 15 minutes, but then also get some time to develop, like use those techniques and then develop timing with the quarterbacks within that Indy kind of period as well.
Brilliant. And then obviously out of that, another question that we had was, have you got any tips and tricks for wide receivers or wide receiver coaches that might not jump off the page, that you've just developed over the years? We'll go to Mike first on that one.
Tips and tricks is a bit. There's no tricks to put to coaching wide receiver really, but there are definitely things to look out for, definitely things that we want to avoid, and making sure that everybody's running everything 100% of the time is a big one. We don't want to see people getting to the top of their route and actually they've given up. They realise the ball's not coming their way, and they're just doing their own thing. There's plenty more to be done. So just seeing the EP Sports plugs coming in.
Yeah. I know. This is the best decision Harry ever made. That's great. He's going to leave rich.
Someone's getting a bonus now.
There you go. Brickballing for the win, a free code. I'm joking.
But there are other things for me, a big bugbear that I have is you see a lot of especially young kids that have watched the game. They've been watching Odell, for example, and they come in and they think that's it. They are the nuts. They can do it, and they start off with their hands crossed over on their knees, not really looking at what they're doing, and they're up against a press coverage or something, and you think, surely guys, you need to get your hands up and be ready to face what's coming up against you. So I would say the biggest tip is to coach against DBs to show what type of leverages, what type of thing you're looking to see, and what to expect as soon as you come out of your game, so that you can run a better route in the end.
I don't know what happened then. I thought the transformer had taken over there.
Morgan touched his phone and the world just went to shit.
And Jamie, I think you love press coverage, don't you? I think you mentioned that it's your favourite coverage.
Any tips and tricks? Question, my favourite coverage. What, for press?
Yeah, go on for press specifically.
Run past them for being dumb. Why would they do that? It never makes sense. It never makes sense. No, I mean, I understand the concept, like press coverage. If you can, hold up people even just a little bit, you can bring.
I was going to say, because I've definitely played against DKP where I've seen D-Mac howling on the sideline in press coverage, screaming in someone's face.
Who?
David McNally.
Yeah, well, he howls in everyone's face. He likes to do that, but no, actually, I love Macca. He's a top boy. That's why your nickname put me off. I was like, who the hell is Nemo? So he's an example of like a really capable DB. So occasionally you'll get guys that can go step for step, but I just always think it's one of those things where you're putting someone in a position where, in particular, if you're going to run a fade on that, like they're in the worst possible position to give up the biggest possible outcome for the offense. It's something that, like, time and time again works in Britball. Most of the time, it works in Britball because the quarterback chucks up junk, and then it's 12 yards behind, and then the receiver goes to stop, and the DB clatters into him, and you get the PI anyway. So it's like the sheer number of ways that you can like lose by being in press coverage is just phenomenal. Like, I don't understand why you would do it. I don't like it's fine if you're like on the goal line and you have a slant run or something like that, but why you would do it on the 20 or whatever.
And Harry, more
sense.
specific, let's go tips and tricks for beating zone coverage from a receiver's perspective.
Zone coverage. I think for zone, it's like a lot
That
of it
sucks as well.
Yeah, it kind of depends, like understanding the zones. I think that's a big thing. So it doesn't like, obviously, if you draw it up on Madden, you understand what cover 3 is, right? But a lot of the time it comes to you having an understanding of the defender's responsibilities. So understanding that how you kind of attack defenders and which way you try and access the field, especially for under coverage. So when we talk about the kind of second level linebacker level, like understanding how those guys should react. Obviously, that doesn't always mean that's how they will react. So for zone coverage, the big thing is understanding where the holes should be. Understanding if you're coming out off the back of someone, that means you're actually further away from everyone else's zone. So understanding when you're entering that kind of soft spot in the zone. And then you talk a lot about like kind of guys slowing down within zones and sitting down. So the big thing for that is actually being able to run full speed, but then also kind of process how the defenders are moving. So understanding where they're going. A lot of the times when you play teams, though, especially at kind of a GB level as well, like they're not going to run a bunch of different zone coverages, right? It's not the NFL. They're going to be like a 2-high or a 1-high team. So generally you're going to be in a kind of very similar coverages. So anticipating that isn't too bad. I think it's very achievable to have good assumptions pre-snap of what the zone or how those guys are going to react. The big thing for you, especially when you're playing wide out, is understanding how those guys are going to move and how that then affects what the quarterback's seeing, because you want to make the quarterback give him the easiest throw possible. That's what I always wanted to do. I always want to make sure I can give the QB the easiest and make it very visible for him where the ball needs to go. Right? Can I widen this guy out by attacking his leverage and then come back in to give myself a bigger window? So understanding the coverages, and that comes with kind of time playing against them. One of the kind of issues you do get with that though is when you're practicing, you're always against like the same coverage. So we would always play against our own cover 3. So we got really good at understanding cover 3, but then when you get to a 2-high team, you don't really understand. And then scout isn't always as good. Do you know what I mean? Like those guys aren't reacting the same way that you do. So getting into as many opportunities where you can to kind of practice against different coverages. 7-on-7 is amazing for that because you get a really clear view. Do you know what I mean? The QB is not under any pressure as well, so the ball's going to come out, you know that. So it helps you to kind of develop those understanding of the zone stuff. So that's a big thing for me, I think, on zone coverage.
No, brilliant. And Andrew, anything there to wrap up in terms of general tips and tricks for wide receivers or even for the coaches who are coaching there?
I think you need to know how you're trying to get your point across to somebody, and that can be juniors, women's, adult, whatever it is. Because like we were talking about learning how to catch earlier, and I think it was Harry said, J Moss was saying how like guys will have their hands out really tense and it'll bounce off. So like an easy coaching point would be like, what if I threw an egg to you right now? How are you going to catch it? Oh, maybe all soft, yeah, because I don't want to break my face. There quickly straight away is a coaching point of soft hands. Like if you say people soft hands, once you've been around football, you'll kind of get it. But you've got a new guy, and like, what the hell do you mean by that? Like, how do you unpick the terminology that you understand without thinking about it? And how do you get it across to a guy after a rep so you can give them something constructive that they will then understand and apply on the next rep? And then from the flip of that for coaches, as soon as you see that coaching point being used, you then re-emphasize it to kind of like reinforce the good behavior to then see that repeated. It's just like, unless otherwise they might do it. And unless they're really switched on, like, oh yeah, coach said this and I did this and it worked. Unless they're really switched onto it, they're not going to keep doing it over and over again.
I just feel like every single session now, there's just going to be a wide receiver coach with a 6-pack of eggs in his pocket, in his bag, throwing eggs in. And thanks for that, coach. I'm also going to throw that on my little boy because he catches very firm with his hands, so he's going to get eggs tomorrow.
Harry Routledge will have a range of different visors that are available
from EP Sports. That is true.
He's probably considering not even buying eggs right now.
Easy sell, right?
So I'm going to snake back round. So Adam, you're not hindered this time. I'll let you go first. So have you got any? You touched on it there. Have you got any good drills that kids and players can pick up or coaches should be? And then interestingly, I added this button, but weather related drills, because obviously it might only be one or two, but the weather has a massive impact on, I'm assuming, a receiver and the ability to catch the ball gets slippy, etc. Any tips in terms of that? But just general drills for now is also good.
Cool. So was that me? I didn't.
Yeah. We'll snake back to you.
So
That was you, Adam.
Sorry, no, I didn't. I
Adam,
didn't hear. I didn't. And I was like, "Who's he talking to?" No one calls me Andrew.
Just ask your missus to come on if you want. Bring that up again.
So I think when there's bad weather and you're on grass and you're on a bog, it's a great time to work on your roots, your footwork, and your cutting. Because if you, for example, train on a 3G all the time, you will get away with a lot of bad footwork and foot placement in a route. So you're doing like box drill, for example, and your plant foot goes way outside. On 3G, it'll hold. On a bad field, you'll just skid and end up doing the split. So I like doing, to take advantage of that kind of stuff. I like doing footwork drills on poor ground, because then when you're on good ground, it feels like you're running on air kind of thing. And I think especially when it's poor weather, reduce it so that you've got something you can catch, because wet ball, wet gloves, if they still insist on wearing gloves in the rain, you want to be able to have success in an indie drill. So if you can just you're shaking your head at me, Jamie. If you can just get reps where the routes are being done well, you haven't got a quarterback, you might not have a coach with a good arm, something that you can then just kind of like reinforce the repetition of what you want. That's a really good starting point, because then when you go into a team period with the quarterbacks, for example, you can then get really dialed in on keeping the ball dry, rotating it that way, so that it's not just a case of you're trying to catch something heavy, wet, slick, and it's just a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah, I think a top tip I heard as well in game, I think you can actually, before the snap, you can correct me if wrong, you can ask for the ball to be dried by a referee, can't you, before it's snapped as well. So any quarterbacks out there, or centres, make sure you can always ask for the play to be stopped, and that's a ref's timeout, isn't it, to get the ball dried. Yeah. And Harry, if that doesn't the case, have you got any just generic drills that that work for you, or you think coaching will be really useful that people should implement?
So I think one thing that we always do is, especially for QBs and receivers, we always practice with a leather football. So we won't ever use like a composite, right? So because especially if it's wet, those balls are so slick, it's like impossible to catch anyway. So we'll always use we'll use like last year's game balls normally, and then we'll use them in practice. That's always a big one. Then it's always on the QB to keep hold of that ball, like keep it dry and look after it, because he's the one throwing it. Right, so that's the big thing for us, is just practicing with leather balls, so you get used to because it is different, especially like when you've got to take your gloves off when it's wet to catch leather football. The big thing, like we use, so a lot of them we'll just use kind of like settle and noose and pat and go are two like the main drills that we'll run. So essentially where you just kind of work to cone, work back to middle, catch the ball and work upfield. And then pat and go is just literally, you're just kind of jogging down the field and working on moving. And then, because I think that's one of the big things, isn't it, that especially like some guys will struggle with, is being able to turn to the ball while you're running full, like kind of straight ahead. So being able to just turn, boom, catch the ball and work forward. So we'll do a lot of pat and go and a lot of cutting drills as well. So like box drills that Andrew was talking about as well there.
Oh, we just had a question coming, but where can I get leather footballs? Does anybody know?
I just naturally assumed that he was selling the most expensive product he had. I was like, is there not a Pro Spiral there we can have, Harry?
Don't buy our cheaper footballs, only our expensive ones.
How much more of the range of EP Sports stock do we get through in the next 20
I think we've still got gloves for us, so gloves are still there. Don't worry, we'll come back to that. So, J-Moss,
to be fair, there's always a back catalogue though. Like EP Sports are always still getting rid of like the Duke football from like 12 seasons ago. They've got like 4 of them that are available for £68 each.
And J-Moss, taking weather out of this, and just more, have you got any top drills which you think, fundamentally I just do every week and it would be really useful for coaches to pick up?
So, I mean, I don't know, like in terms of actual coaching, like I just always try and be as specific as possible. Like, you see like so much of the time there's guys and they'll do things and we actually break down what you're doing. You stop and you sort of go, why do we do this? Why do we do that? Why do we do the next thing? And unless you can find an example of it happening in a game, the actual physical action happening, don't do it. So that would be the one thing. The other thing, and we kind of touched on it a couple of times in this discussion, is that part of coaching, I guess, is not necessarily just, you being there on a Sunday with that player and then you sort of talk them through things. Like, it's also about encouraging guys. Like, if you want to be really good, you're going to have to do it a lot more than you practice with the team. The team will practice, if you're lucky, twice a week. And I know when we got to the playoffs, usually back when I played, we'd practice 4 times a week through the playoffs, but that was never sustained. And you really need to sustain at least twice a week right through the off season. Go out and just call the quarterback, because they've got plenty of things they could be doing as well. And make sure that you're catching plenty, because that's the one thing that will make you a lot better, is if you get an awful lot of repetition. And by all means, and no one's got an infinite amount of time, so if you don't have the time to do it or whatever, that's one thing. But speak to your coach, figure out what you should be doing when you go out, try and get out as often as possible. And to bring it back to the weather point, don't wear your gloves. That's just stop it. Stop trying to wear your gloves. You don't have to wear them. I would really advocate that. Like, learn to catch without gloves, because then when it's wet, it's actually not all that bad. The ball, when it's wet in your hand, is actually not all that.
I think it's something to add on just what Jamie said there. We're all at a stage now where we're really excited to get back on the field with our teams in the next couple of weeks and stuff. So having everyday drills that are your first 10 minutes, no matter what, that you don't have to explain, that you literally put the cones down and the players know what's going on straight away. So that might be box drills. It might be the when you have 4 cones in a row and you run up to one, buzz your feet next. So there's whatever you find to be like your everyday catching, set a noose, pat and go. Coming up with 4 or 5 of those and teaching those to your players in their individual groups, so that there's a flow and there's no kind of lag in terms of teaching it. It's very basic, it's very easy to understand, and then with the rest of your time you can get into things that are a little bit more specific, a little bit more complex with regards to the playbook or whatever you're installing.
Brilliant. And Mike, have you got any specific drills that you think are really useful?
Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, I more would just jump straight in there and stole pretty much what I was going to say. But to follow on from what Jamie said, yeah, it's drills that you can take away. So you can run these drills as part of the warm up or the first 10-15 minutes of practice that your players will know, and they'll be able to take it away and do it in their own time, and be able to repeat it. It be that ladder drills, be that box drills or whatever. They can take it out and run it on their own. They don't need a whole supporting team around them to practice. They don't need a quarterback. They don't need anybody else. They can just get it done on their own. But when it comes to bad weather, I mean, hot weather is equally important to make sure that you are taking care of your players and not absolutely running them ragged on all these ridiculous long passing routes, and making sure you're getting adequate breaks in there as well for water. But in cold and wet weather, which, let's face it, we get a lot more of in this country, it's about bringing it close, tightening everything up, not putting the ball in a position where it's going to end up on the floor. So trying to keep it on these short, secure routes, and get physical as well. Get in and really embrace contact in these in the wet and cold weathers, where you can practice catching a short route, be that screens, be that hitches, whatever, and just turn and have a thud into a bag or something like that can practice securing the ball in wet weather as well.
Yeah, brilliant. We had another question come up. Is there any way we can get high quality gloves if you were? No, I know Harry's got to go, because I think line of duty. I did say we'd wrap up for 9 o'clock, so I'm going to snake round finally. I just asked you for one thing you would look for in a GB player in your wide receivers. What is it? What's that one thing you'd be looking for? Mike, I'll let you go first, so Morgan doesn't steal them from you.
No worries. Coachability. I mean, at this point, when we're working with under 17s, we're not expecting them to know football inside out and to be fully fluent in a playbook that they've never seen before. but to be able to pay attention, take instruction, and pick up what they need to, very quickly is something that we're keen to look for. I would be keen to look for.
Brilliant. And Harry?
So for me, I think a lot of it comes down to like guys having like those generic fundamentals to a level that you want. So you want guys to be able to get a stance and start. You want them to be able to run through box drills, like understand basic route concepts. But I think the big thing is being able to be coachable. Guys being willing to show that they can do other stuff as well. Like a lot of the time, and I know it's hard but like guys being able to pick up the playbook quickly is a big thing at a national team level because you don't get loads of time. And so guys that can pick up, and I'm a prime example of it, right? Because I played for GB for however long, but one of the big things that I could do was pick up the playbook. And when they change it, do you know what I mean? If you're on a tournament and you've got 3 games in 10 days, they're going to put stuff in that 2 days before, a day before the game. So you need to be able to pick that stuff up and run with it. So understanding kind of concepts and as many concepts as you can and how the GB stuff might apply to and translate to what you understand is a big thing, like for me. Like so guys that pick that stuff up and run with it, obviously being good at football helps as well.
Usually helpful. J-Max?
Yeah, fanatical effort for basically all the same reasons Harry says. Like if you've got someone who really, really wants to be there and really, really has that drive, there's a really good chance that they're not at that practice and they're not rubbish anyway. They've got there for a reason. So if they've got that, plus they've got like an effort that's insatiable, they'll be fine.
No, it's a good point. So at that point, everyone's kind of on that same level, aren't you? Looking who can make that next step up to jump off the page, as it were. And finally, Morgan?
I think it's understanding what goes on, not just at the practice. So obviously, if you've got a trial, for example, like if we take the students, for example, me and Harry went through like 50 odd guys worth of tape, like looking at traits and stuff like that. And if we'd have got to the trials, we would have spent maybe 20, 30 minutes after that practice going through each guy and kind of like comparing our notes, but then also talking about what we saw in the practice. And to Mike's point, the coachability, you'll pick up on that, the effort, you're going to pick up on that. And not just with the playing ability, because being out there at a tournament with guys like Harry and stuff, you need players who not only are fantastic athletes, but they have to be able to be a team player. They need to be able to fit in with the group. They need to be able to put that work in outside of your practice time or your whatever time it is in the classroom. So you need to be able to kind of get that full understanding of a player, because I know from juniors as well, we've had young people who have come down from whatever program with kind of like the airs and graces of what they thought they were, and that attitude just didn't sit well on the field. And you look at it and go, well, I'm not entirely sure if we're going to be able to say, like, put a GB badge on your helmet, take you to an international game and have you represent if that's who you are. So yeah, the character thing is just as important of the physical, if not more. And probably not more. It'd be helpful if you were like 6'4", 220, run a 4.4. That'd be great. But be a nice guy as well at the same time.
Yeah.
4'4", so that was always your struggle.
6'4", 215 now. Thank you very much.
I think that's it. It is like, it's understanding the controllables, though, isn't it? Like, you can't control how fast. Well, you can to an extent, but how tall you are. Like these things, but effort. Do you know what I mean? Understanding playbook. Like just being able to be coachable, those are all things that you can control quite easily. So those are the big things that guys can take away. As long as you have them in your mind when you go and you're open-minded and when you go to these events and you get the opportunities, like you'll find that it really pays off being able to kind of build that rapport with the coaches, build it with the other players, and you'll kind of see that kind of comes to fruition down the line.
It ties back to backing yourself as a coach as well, because if you've got guys who are talented because they got to a GB practice and who have fanatical effort and they're not a success, there's only one way that happens. Like, they got there, they're good, and they really try. That's your job at that point. So you're just kind of backing yourself as a coach. If you're asking for effort, then that basically means that you're saying the rest of it's up to you, which is true.
Yeah, brilliant. Guys, that was absolutely fantastic. Harry, I'm sorry, we're 7 minutes into line of duty for you. You have to put it on pause, mate. I'm
We have to
sorry.
work out all what the cheers is or whatever next. I've got going on.
I couldn't put you up. I'm sorry about it. It was all the
Pausing live TV's been about for like 15 years. Harry's sitting here like freebie, like, come on, man. I need something.
I know I rewind.
All the sales from EP Sports tonight, you might actually
get scanned. But guys, thanks so much for coming on. It's a pleasure to be on and talk about receivers. And I'm sure we'll catch you and look forward to all your progress with the GB squads when we get up and running. Pleasure to have you on, guys, and thank you very much. Thanks to everyone for watching, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.